When it comes to old-school 2D side-scrolling platformers, there is no doubt Mario is the most well-known video game franchise. With a game as recent as Super Mario Wonder for the Switch giving the formula a much-needed shift from the new Super Mario Bros. Structure the games have been using since the DS days. And just like the 3D open-world Mario games, the 2D side-scrollers also have a lot of charm, and it's fair to say that it is, after all, where Mario started as a whole back in the 80s. But something I noticed is that there's an era of Mario side-scrolling platformers that is not talked about a lot, at least not from my own point of view. The original Game Boy had a lot of games which were very iconic to the console. The first-gen Pokémon games, Link's Awakening, and even the very first Kirby game, Kirby's Dream Land, which I actually covered in this channel a couple years ago. However, this was a quite rather obscure era of Mario platformers, with this console having what are arguably two of the most underrated side-scrolling games in the franchise, Super Mario Land and Super Mario Land 2 6 Golden Coins. If there's anything relevant about these games, is that both of them feature the very first appearances of Daisy and Wario. While in Mario Land 1 it is Daisy the princess we need to rescue instead of Peach, for some reason, and in Mario Land 2, Wario stars as the final boss, and the subsequent Mario Land games will have him as the protagonist, and it will feature the name Wario Land from then on, which is kinda funny because only the first Wario Land game is referred to as Super Mario Land 2, but every game after that, meaning Wario Land 2 onwards, dropped the Mario Land from the title, making it 100% a Wario-oriented game, with it having entries not only on the Game Boy, but also on the Game Boy Color, Virtual Boy, GBA, and Wii. And as we all know, this series will go on to inspire other games, with the most recent one being, unsurprisingly, Pizza Tower. So technically we could say that Pizza Tower will not exist if it wasn't for Mario Land, but I digress. I really wanted to cover both Mario Land games in this video, mostly because I feel like there's not really a lot of love for these games around. And these are really worth covering when compared to other games in the franchise because of their uniqueness in terms not only of gameplay, but also aspects such as environments and even enemies and bosses, with one of the biggest absences being Bowser. But that's just one of many differences regarding these games. So let's talk about Mario Land. This was a launch title for the Game Boy back in 1989, and unlike previous games which were set in the Mushroom Kingdom, this game takes place in Sarasa Land, which is a country ruled by Princess Daisy and consists of 4 worlds referred to as kingdoms. And this game's main villain is called Tatanga, an alien who captures Daisy and brainwashes the inhabitants of Sarasa Land, arguably one of Mario's more obscure villains, as his appearances after these games are very scarce, with the latest one being a cameo as a spirit in Smash Bros. Ultimate. As for enemies, you will initially have the usual Koopas, Goombas, and Piranha Plants, with a really interesting change being that instead of living shells you could interact with, whenever you jump on a Koopa their shells will become bombs that you will have to avoid. This will be the only Mario game where the Koopa shells will behave this way. Unlike other games in the franchise, which will feature normal environments such as overworld, snow, underwater, etc., this game is mostly based in an Eastern type of setting, mostly Egypt. As far as I know, this is the first time a Mario game will go on to reference a real-life mythological setting in one of its games. And it's also not something that will be done a lot onwards, with games like Mario Wacky Worlds planning to explore even more of these real-life areas, but said game will end up being cancelled. I also have a video covering up that game if you are interested. Not only do you get to visit Egypt in this game, but also a Moai island in which the enemies are, unsurprisingly, Moai heads. There are environments such as a cave-type level and even a more Oriental-inspired one, with interesting stuff such as what seem to be actual human ninjas as enemies. There's also levels where you get to control a submarine that shoots rockets and even an airplane that likewise shoots projectiles. The variety in terms of gameplay styles is really decent in this, and that's something I feel a lot of people talk about. Unfortunately, when it comes to power-ups, this title is a little more lackluster than usual, because you only get the flower power-up, which behaves in a rather different manner than your usual Mario game, being shot like a cannonball that bounces around instead of a regular fireball. Now, with all of this said, this is a really short game, being beaten in roughly 45 minutes to an hour, so it's not something people will spend ages trying to figure out secrets or having a difficult time with bosses because their patterns are fairly easy to learn. I would say the only thing that I can really complain about is the controls. Despite the fact they are very lenient most of the time, they can also get really floaty, and being able to land on platforms can become a hassle sometimes, and this is evident when you get to the later parts of the game. And because of the length and simplicity of this game, I feel like it can get under people's radars easily, but it is nonetheless a Mario platformer, and the first one to ever be on a portable console, so that's already a big merit in my books. Now, how do they improve this in the sequel? Well, let's just say it does feel more like a Mario game. For this video specifically, I decided to go with the Mario Land DX ROM hack, which essentially adds color to the game, as it does make the visual experience a lot more vibrant, and let me tell you, I could have easily seen this kind of game being in the Game Boy Color like this. But anyway, Super Mario Land 2 is, as the title implies, a direct sequel to Super Mario Land, and it does implement a lot of new stuff from the last game. While the first one was a decent first Mario game for the Game Boy, the sequel proves what could have been done on the first game and was done here in terms of making a more polished Mario platformer. First off, this is the very first Mario game, at least to my knowledge, in which you are able to move around the hub world and decide the order in which you want to play the levels. There is no World 1, 2, etc., only different worlds, and it is up to the player to choose where they want to go, with there being 7 worlds in total, 6 being the main ones in which you gotta defeat a boss and collect its respective coin, hence the subtitle of 6 golden coins. And that's just a bare bones concept of the game, but there's obviously a lot more going on. First off, let's talk about the gameplay, because this game does feel a lot more satisfying to control than Mario Land 1, and not as floaty. In fact, Mario feels a lot more responsive and tight this time, and you're able to backtrack in the level if you need to, something that was not possible in the previous game. Another aspect of this sequel that is very important to mention is the power-ups. The Fire Flower is back, and this time it does behave like the power-up we all know and love, shooting fireballs at the enemies we aim at. But there's also a second power-up which is a brand new introduction to the series, which are the bunny ears. You get this by getting, unsurprisingly, a carrot from the mystery boxes. And this power-up has to be easily my favorite thing about this game, as you're able to pretty much fly through the level with it just by spamming the A button. You fall progressively, and it can get a tad tedious sometimes when it comes to landing in a specific spot, but mostly it feels really good to just be able to float around open areas. Although, unlike the cape in Super Mario World, you cannot attack with this power-up, so that makes the cape still a better item, IMO. Unlike the previous game, which focused on some mythology and historical places for environments, this game takes a step back and focuses on more run-of-the-mill locations that you would usually find in a Mario game. Like, you know, forest, caves, sky, haunted mansion, etc. But the interesting thing here is that you're also able to go through unusual worlds, such as a world themed after a house in which you become really tiny, and also a world set in a mechanical giant Mario, which, sure, why not? Both of these worlds are pretty interesting though, especially the mechanical Mario one, which looks incredibly unusual in terms of design for a Mario game. Just the overall fact that this game goes to brand new places previous entries in the franchise didn't go is really cool. And speaking about places previous games didn't tackle, we get to go to space in this game. And not only that, but Mario sports a pretty nice astronaut costume in this world, and we also get to experience space gravity mechanics. I feel like this is one of the coolest aspects of Mario Land 2, and something I wish they kept in more games. Also, worth mentioning is that you get to control Luigi as well. And while it is cool that you can switch between the two brothers, I don't really feel any substantial difference between the two other than looks. Because usually Luigi will be a lot more floaty than Mario, and that's what will set them both apart. But I guess in this game their physics are exactly the same. Anyway, once you defeat the various bosses in this game and get their respective coins, the door to Wario's castle will open, and we will get to face him, but not before a really convoluted and jarring platforming section. For real, it took me a good while to get to Wario with just how many borderline unavoidable obstacles there were, and I'm not against final levels being difficult, that is, after all, the whole point. But when it feels like too much, I think that's also a need to be said. So eventually we get to face the man himself, and his boss battle is not really incredibly difficult, but it does come with many phases, in which you have to keep jumping on him while also avoiding the light bulbs that fall off from the ceiling. He even gets a bunny power-up and a flower power-up in this battle, so that's another neat addition to the game, just using the power-ups against the player. But after a good while just jumping on Wario and dealing with his hazards, we beat the game. And who do we rescue this time, you may ask? No one, it seems. All that happens is that Wario's castle becomes Mario's castle? A pretty anticlimactic ending if you ask me, but I guess an ending nonetheless. Either way, you all know what happened with this series of games afterwards. Mario Land 3 will become the first Wario Land, and every game after that will be sequels to Wario Land, with Mario's likeness being completely removed. And I think it's for the better, seeing as just how popular Wario became as a character in the following years, getting not only these games but many more, with arguably the best series in which he's the main character being WarioWare. As for Mario Land 1 and 2, I will say that these games are not amazing by any means, but they are definitely underrated gems that I don't see people covering often. Both had their own charm and enjoyable aspects, and as a matter of fact, Super Mario Land 2 will be the last original Mario platformer until New Super Mario Bros. For the DS. Since every Mario platformer released on the GBA, as many of you already know, are just ports of the SNES versions, all except for the SNES remake of Mario 1 and Lost Levels, which I guess didn't get the same treatment because of Mario Bros. Deluxe on the Game Boy Color. But regardless, Mario Land 1 and 2 still hold a significant place in Mario history as the first Mario side-scrolling platformers on a portable console. And I feel like anyone who is familiar with games like the first 3 Mario Bros. Or Super Mario World but hasn't played the Land games will definitely get a kick out of these too. They're really fun and can be beaten in a small amount of time. So yeah, that's Mario Land 1 and 2. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, definitely feel free to like and subscribe to the channel, as that's what keeps the channel alive and kicking and motivates me to keep working on content. And as always, feel free to follow me on Twitch as well, where I stream consistently, and I'm still trying to get affiliate as of the recording of this video. So yeah, with all of that said, thanks a lot for watching and I will see you next time. Bye!